All right. Well, I guess now's a good time to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone that is joining us. It seems like there's a lot of people from Massachusetts and from North Carolina. Usually, if there's anyone else, feel free to put in your chat where you're from. It's nice to see that there's like a wide range of students. So thank you for joining us for our Earth Month series. Oh, if I look this way, there's two screens. I'm not ignoring you guys, I promise. So welcome to our Earth Month speaker series. We're going to be talking about climate change, and I will introduce our speaker in just a moment. And I will advance the slide because my computer's not working. So for those of you that are just joining us, this program is hosted by the Biogen Community Lab and the Lemelson MIT programs. So a little bit about the Community Lab. We were established in 2002, so we are almost 20 years old, which is kind of crazy. And we have been working with students all around the greater Boston area and the North Carolina area, a little bit more spread out down there than just us. And we've seen over 57,000 students since our opening in 2002. So we see schools, we see students in the summer, we have teachers come in for professional development and a whole bunch of other things around the community. And then a little bit about the Lemelson MIT program. They were founded in 1994, so they're a little bit older than us. And they are part of the MIT School of Engineering, so the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, for those of you who might not know what MIT is. And their goal is to inspire young people to kind of pursue their ideas of inventions. And they really focus on helping students kind of, get their idea and run with it and actually create something that is a tangible product and actually can be used as a tool to help better the lives of anyone. And they have seen an estimated 3,200 students and almost 500 educators. So we are all making some big numbers here. And then to any of you guys who are joining us from the NC Science Festival, we want to give a quick shout out to you guys. Thank you for joining us, and feel free to check out our other two events that are coming up May 19th about global STEM, and then June 16th about the LGBTQ Pride Month. And then to those joining from the Cambridge Science Festival, a big shout out to you guys too. A little bit about that, the Cambridge Science Festival is hosting their 30 Days of Science, which is all about, well, science in the month of April. And they have a bunch of cool things. So if you want to check out what's going on with their project, feel free to check it out at the Cambridge Science Festival website. And now, without further ado, after all of those advertisements, we have today with us Will Atkinson. He is a Biogen graduate fellow, so he kind of works with a program supported by Biogen, and he works at MIT with the, I'm going to remember this, the PPT research group with Policy Engagement Initiative. So he's a research assistant, and he does a lot of work with MIT. I may have butchered that, so I'm sorry about that, Will. I knew I was going to do it right, but I totally might have slipped that up. But without further ado, Will can take it away, and he's going to talk to you guys about climate change. So I'll let you share your screen.
All right. Well, thank you, Connor, and it's great to be with all of you. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you all can hear me.
Oh, I did forget to mention also, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post it throughout the lecture. Will can either see them during his talk and answer them then, or we can kind of get to them all at the end. Will, that's whatever you prefer. But make sure you guys are thinking of some questions and feel free to ask whenever.
Sure. Yes, I'd love to keep this as interesting as possible because I know it can be hard to focus on these Zoom webinars. So sure, definitely. I'll be looking at the chat throughout. I have it open now, and I'm excited to talk with you all. So feel free to put things in there, and I'm happy to answer questions either during or after or both or whenever. But yes, I am excited to talk to you all about connecting on climate change. This is a super broad topic, so I could imagine it would be, oh, there we go. All right. Hard to sort of know where to go with this because there's so much here. That said, when I was trying to think of ways to structure this and to figure out things to talk about, it really did come back to this idea of connecting in a few different ways. And of course, I encourage you all to put in if there are any questions or specific topics that you're interested in, feel free to put those in the chat as well, and I'll see if I can get to that as we go. But overall, I think there's a few different things that I wanted to talk about with connecting. So first is connecting the dots. So there's lots of different parts of this issue, both in the science and its impacts, as well as its solutions. And I like to think of that as three S's. So the science, keeping it simple, the impacts, getting that they're serious, but then the solutions and seeing that things are solvable if we can work really hard all together towards these issues. So simple, serious, and solvable. We will talk more about each of those to come. The next thing I wanted to do was to talk more about how we can connect with other people on this issue, because as many of you are probably aware, this can be a divisive issue for some people, even if the science is pretty clear at this point. And so it's important to have good conversations with other people, no matter what their background or thoughts are. And so to do that, there's a few different things that we can think about. I have 3 V's this time on voice, venue, and values. And we'll talk about each of those things in terms of what makes for a good conversation and how we can find common ground. And then finally, I know that a lot of you are students. I am a recent student, so I graduated high school in 2014. And so I'm not very far away from that world at all. And so I think it'll be fun to talk a little bit about how to connect one's path to this issue if you're interested. And I hope you are, because there's so much work to be done, both in terms of lessons that I've learned, as well as questions you have and things to talk about, including why grades are not everything. So stay tuned for more about that. But yes, to start, I love to start with a little game to get ourselves warmed up and to be more interactive. So we're going to talk about some polls. You may have seen polls like with the presidential election this past fall. There's also polls about climate change, believe it or not. And so I want you to put in the chat what you think the answer is to some of these polling questions I'm going to put in. And the closest person is going to get the eternal pride of the 32 people and counting on this webinar. So first, I'm curious, what do you all think about this? So if you had to guess, what % of Americans do you think believe global warming is happening? So just a wild guess, maybe it's half, maybe it's more than half or less. Give it a think. Yeah, so please put it in the chat. So I see 40%, 45, less than half. Keep on putting things in. I'll give it another few seconds. All right, 65, at least 40, 35, 80, all sorts of good things. All right. Awesome, you all are great. So the answer here, according to the most recent poll, is in fact 72%. So I saw a few 70s. Well done for those of you who said that. There's more opportunities otherwise, but yeah, this was interesting to me. This has changed a bit, and you can tell that different places have different amounts. So in parts of North Carolina and Massachusetts, it's maybe more than 72%, or in other parts it's less. But on the whole, the majority of Americans do understand the science and do agree with this issue. So I think that's cool to note for those of us in this world. Here's the next question though. What % do you think believe that global warming will harm them personally? So again, round 2, we'll put this in the chat. Yeah, see what you think about this. So I'm seeing 10, 64, 48, 45, 50s, 20s, 30s, all sorts of other things in between. All right. And so for this one, it actually is only 43%, according to the recent December 2020 polls by several other universities here. And so this is interesting because it turns out that we worry about ourselves less than we think, or we think it'll harm us less than we think it'll harm others, both our immediate family and community, as well as the farther and farther you get away from yourself, often, like the more you think they'll be harmed, but I'll be safe. And I think this is an important thing to think about because as we'll see in the coming slides and conversation, I think it is important to realize that this is a serious issue that already is affecting us in small, but also potentially large ways, and will continue to do so. And I think making those consequences more local and personal is one of the things that that climate science communicators have to do. So awesome, you all are doing great. We've got one more for you. This is a happier one on the solution side. So what percent of Americans do you think support funding for renewable energy, and for research specifically for that? So I know this group talks a lot about innovation. It's definitely a part of the solution we need. So 40, 70, 60, 10, 20. Okay, some people are not so optimistic. All right, 67, 15. All right, and so according to the most recent poll, it is 86% in the entire US. So here's the thing. We can talk about the science or the impacts, and it might be divisive to some people, but with some solutions, maybe not all, but with some solutions, there is widespread support around the country, maybe even higher than 86% in parts of Massachusetts and North Carolina. And so I think this is a really important part of this picture, is that even if we don't necessarily agree on parts of it, if we are agreeing on different types of solutions, that's an important way forward towards solving this problem. And so just in these few little polls that I called games, and that maybe they weren't that fun, but they're a way to get you in the chat. You can see this arc from the simple science to the serious impacts to the solvable solutions, if that's a term that you can use. And hopefully we'll talk more about that, but that's an initial sense for how people perceive these three things and how they relate. Awesome, I'm just gonna check the chat. Okay. Oh, I was way off too when I saw this the first time. I thought it was a lot less than it was. All right. Cool. So first, the science. I'm sure some or many of you have seen these kinds of things before, but I just wanted to do a very quick rundown just so we're all on the same page, and to show how simple it really is. So in a big part of the problem, we are taking rocks out of the ground, we are setting them on fire. That fire is releasing gas, and that gas is raising temperatures. And so how does this actually happen? Many of you have probably seen this too, but there's this idea called the greenhouse effect. And I won't spend too long on this because it may be review for some of you, but there's a cool little animation from NASA, the folks that got our astronauts on the moon. And so they have a little diagram where we get sun reaching the earth, and some of the sun escapes, but then other parts of it gets absorbed and then radiated as heat to warm our planet. And so with that heat, when that heat gets radiated, a lot of it gets trapped by these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that can then actually warm the earth, which is in general, at least at first, a good thing. So I think of this as a blanket. So without this blanket of greenhouse gases, we would freeze. And so it turns out that way back in Earth's history, like hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a time when there were not enough greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to have a stable climate. And we actually had what they call a snowball Earth. So this Earth entirely covered by ice, maybe 600 or 700 million years ago. And then we got more gases in the atmosphere and it became not a snowball Earth anymore. But obviously you can go too far with this blanket. This blanket can become too toasty, and that can be bad for us. So for instance, when in Massachusetts, it went from snowy on Friday to 70 degrees on Tuesday, if I had kept that same blanket on my bed, I would have been really warm last night. And so it's the same idea here where this blanket is too warm for us right now as we add gas to the atmosphere. And those gases are, again, coming mostly from fossil fuels. That tracks really well with temperature. We've seen that there really, like, this is the best explanation. There really isn't another way to think about it. And so this is why we see what we see with the data that NASA and others have shown. So that's the science. It's pretty simple, but it doesn't necessarily scare me viscerally yet. This kind of thing is what does. So these are some stats on air pollution and on how serious it is around the world in terms of health effects and causes of death worldwide. So There was a recent study that came out of Harvard in February 2021, just a few weeks ago, that estimated that just the pollution from particulate matter from fossil fuels was responsible for as many as 1 in 5 deaths worldwide in recent years in this decade. And you can see similar or even higher percentages for some leading causes of death for different diseases here. And of course, it's a little bit different from climate change. You have these very local pollutants, which can be different from these very global greenhouse gases that cause that blanket. But it's still a really serious issue, and it has a similar cause with this pollution. And of course, that's only one of many, many effects. Here's a big laundry list, and this can get really depressing, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but you can see there's issues with climate change and extreme heat in terms of the outdoor workers and farmers who are not doing so well when it gets hotter. We have issues with allergies this spring, especially in places like North Carolina, where we have longer pollen seasons now, and that can be really bad for people's health as well. We have these increased risk for diseases, both from things like mosquitoes, as well as diseases from the water that can come about more as the weather gets warmer. And so these are some really bad impacts that climate change already is having and that it can have more and more. And this is why I think it's so important to care, especially from a justice perspective, where some people are being affected more than others with these consequences, and especially these overburdened communities that are facing it first and worst don't have the capacity to adapt as much. That said, there is a positive spin on this, which is that the more we can do to work on solutions, the more we can reduce all those bad health impacts and really get a more peaceful and healthy world. And so the more we can have clean energy, the more we can have sustainable cities, the more we can have healthy diets and many, many other things that we'll talk about. The more we can reduce this pollution that leads to heart and lung disease and have better mental health and fewer injuries and other things from heat extremes. And so I think that's a really important way to get out of the doom and gloom that climate change is often in, because there's a lot that is bad news, but there's a lot that we can do about it that can make that bad news less bad. And so that's why I like to focus on the solutions when I talk about it so much. And so speaking of solutions, there are a ton of them. So I'm going to post a few links after I stop screen sharing once we get towards the end. And this is one of them, but you can always look it up on your computer now. It's called Project Drawdown, and it has 100 solutions or more in all aspects of life, from clean energy with wind and solar to food solutions like reducing food waste and having a more plant-rich diet, all the way to restoring forests and actually having more efficient ACs is a big one, in fact, because of the gases that air conditioners give off. There's so many, and some of these are technical, some of these are more societal, like with health and education. And the big message here is that it really takes all of us. So it's going to take research institutions like MIT to do inspiring innovation that can drive technologies forward. It's going to take companies like Biogen to really have these ambitious goals and to push forward. Oh, thank you for the drawdown link. It's going to take policymakers from the US to states like Massachusetts and North Carolina, to the cities that we're all in, the little towns that we can all help out with, and then of course, global governments as well. And it's going to take us too as individuals to make sustainable choices and to inspire others around us to do the same. And so I think that's one of the take-home messages, is that it's not going to be about one solution or one entity that does it. It's going to be about all of us doing this together, to come together as they did on the first Earth Day in 1970, where I think like 10 or 20% of the US population did something for Earth Day. And it was a huge effort that brought a lot of change in the environmental world. So the more we can all act together, the more we can have a combined effect. That said, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do as individuals is simply to talk about it. So we don't have to have the power of like I don't know, a big decision maker that has all this power, but we can just talk about these things more and more with the folks that we do know, with the folks in our schools and in our families and in our communities. And that's the kind of thing that can really help as well in inspiring people to multiply their effect and to do that more and more. So moving from connecting those dots into connecting with others, I wanted to give some tips for how to have conversations with others about these issues in ways that are supportive and can really be good, genuine conversations to move things forward. So the first thing that I have here is voice. And this is really about who you're talking to and who is the best person to talk to this person about the issue. So if it's your family, they know you, that's great. You can probably talk about them pretty easily, talk to them pretty easily about these issues. If there's somebody you don't know, it's probably less likely, especially if they live far away or if they have other differences. And so the first step really here is to figure out who that trusted messenger might be, who they'll have a good conversation with, who they can really trust. And then, of course, going back to that question before at the very beginning about not many of us thinking of this as a personal issue. The question is how we can personalize that message to make it more relevant to one's own life. And so this here, anybody know who this is? Feel free to put it in the chat if you have a guess. So this is a popular weathercaster who is on the NBC Today show as well as a few others. Let's see, Al Roker, yes, you both have it. Risa and Christina. So yeah, so Al is one of the 1,000 weathercasters who works with this nonprofit called Climate Central that I used to work for before coming to MIT and Biogen. And so this is a program to try to allow weathercasters to have these conversations more broadly with their local audiences. And this came out of a poll about a decade ago that said that in terms of who people in general trust about science issues like climate change, people usually, on average, go first to scientists and then family. But with climate change, the third group after those two is actually their weather person. So they trust their weather person to talk about weather. And so it's similar with climate. And so the question here was, well, like, I don't know people in North Carolina. I'm in Massachusetts. I don't know your weather or your climate or your people as well as the folks there do. But maybe the people who do the weather in North Carolina can talk about that more and can really have a more local message that can speak to those who already are there. And so this is a way to make that more local and personal and to make sure that we have the right voice to lead these conversations. And so to do that, one of the things that nonprofit would do would be to provide lots of local information, both on the impacts like pollen, as well as the solutions like solar or like planting more trees. And so these were really inspiring ways to get that information locally in a way that hopefully made sense to those watching. And they also would put these other tools together to help people think about these kinds of things in their local areas. So I have a question for you all. It's another chat question that should be a fun one. So I want you to guess how many smartphones could have been charged by the amount of solar energy that the state of Massachusetts generated yesterday. So just for context, Massachusetts, it's a pretty small state, but it's got a decent amount of solar, probably about as much as North Carolina. And it was a decently sunny day yesterday. It was 70 again, and it was, yeah, pretty good out, no rain, so no issues there. So what do you think? How many smartphones could that solar energy have charged? I see 10,000, 10 million, 50 million. Yeah, 1 million. Yeah, lots of good guesses here. I don't know. I had no idea on this. I was easily way off on this. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of 50 million. I'm seeing that's the highest and some others. So it turns out that it was about 1 billion smartphones could have been charged by the amount of solar that actually is in Massachusetts. So this tool looks at the actual panels that are there, the actual weather conditions that are there in the state. You can do this for any state, and I think cities and counties as well. And so you can go on the website. So if you Google Climate Central Weather Power, or I can put the link in the chat after I screen share, you can find this tool and you can play around with it. You can also look at other things. So this table here, it shows the amount of homes that could have been powered. Because obviously we're not just going to be charging smartphones with this. And so you could have actually powered almost a quarter of the homes in the state on these days this week, as well as the homes that have solar. They could have saved their entire energy bill and then some. That's what the numbers more than 100% mean. And so this is a fun way to think about, yeah, jaw drop is right. Oh, nice, and somebody found the link. And so this is a fun way to think about solutions in our communities, and how this can really build. If we have more solar, we can charge even more smartphones, maybe get to 2 billion. But the fact that these have important other considerations like saving energy or saving money on energy bills, as well as things like that. So I thought that would be a fun one to share. So that's voice and the power of being local. The next thing that's good to think about is venue. And I think especially the question here is, what type of venue is best conducive to this conversation? And trying to think about the differences between whether it's a Zoom call like what we're on versus a phone call versus a text message versus a social media post versus a real conversation in person. And I thought this poll was interesting. This is from the Pew Center in 2018. It's probably not too different now, showing that the vast majority of people have not changed their mind on something on social media. You see, it does actually vary by age group and by gender, I guess, too. It's interesting that young men like me are maybe changing their minds more. That surprises me a little bit, but in general, it's low. And so I think the question here is, if you're engaging on social media, when is it best to engage, and when is it best just to pause and decide to move on if it's just not worth it? And I think it's important there to think about those things and how likely it is that you'll have a good conversation on this medium. Next, finally, I wanted to talk about values, and so why it's important once you have the right voice and the right venue to talk about what one cares about to best reach them. So does anybody know what this little machine is here? Any guesses on what this gizmo could be? I wouldn't know just from the picture, so no worries. An AC, that's a good guess. We'll talk about why that's at least partially right. Yeah, nice. Yeah, these are all good guesses. So this is a heat pump, and it's actually partly an AC. So those who said AC or air conditioner, that's right. That's part of what it is. So a heat pump actually is an air conditioner and more. It also can provide heat in the winter by pumping in the heat from outside air into the home to heat it up. And so this is one of many solutions to if you have an electric heat pump that can run on clean electricity, like with solar. This is one solution to make the way we heat our homes better for the environment. Now, the question is, how is this going to be explained to people? Like, how is this actually going to carry out in a conversation? And I heard this great podcast recently from this guy named Nate Adams, who explains why heat pumps are like the Fight Club. So does anybody know what rule number 1 of the Fight Club is? Any good cultural references from the chat? Rule number 1 of the Fight Club. Don't talk about the Fight Club. That's right. So rule number 1 with heat pumps. Don't talk about heat pumps. Not right away, not directly, at least with the technology. But it's to have a conversation about like what this person who may or may not be getting a heat pump in their home cares about. Like, do they care about the comfort of their home and whether it's comfortable? Do they care about cost and reducing the cost of their energy bills? Do they care about things like the environment in some cases? These are all good reasons to have a heat pump. It does vary cost-wise. It can be more or less expensive depending on the model and the climate you're in. But these kinds of questions, like with comfort, cost, and the environment, are good values to think about in terms of ways for Nate to sell its heat pumps instead of going straight to the technical jargony explanation that I gave, but not very well, about how it actually works. So the idea there is to have a good conversation where you can really get a sense for what they care about, and then to focus on what they do care about and why it relates to that. And there's also a great set of resources from Professor Katharine Hayhoe at Texas Tech. She's a fantastic climate scientist. She has a YouTube series called Global Weirding, a little bit different from global warming. It's a great series, and I'll put that in the chat as well if somebody doesn't beat me to it by the end of this. So those are a few ideas for ways to connect on voice, venue, and values. I know we have some time allotted for questions, so I'll be pretty quick with this last part. But I wanted to talk a bit about ideas for connecting your path. And if you care about this issue, or if you have similar issues you are interested in, I just want to say we're going to need a lot of people working on this, and in all aspects of it, from the technology innovation to the pure science, to the communication, to the policy, and everything in between. So definitely consider yourself welcome here. And nice, you all are great with these links. So I'll talk about my path, but big caveat here is that I am just one person. You all have your own interests and backgrounds. And so hopefully these will have some general lessons, but don't take this too seriously as just one person. So I've done a lot of listening and reflecting in terms of my own path. And I think the biggest thing for me is that my interests have changed over time, and my motivations have changed. They've focused or broadened. And the important thing there is to be listening to yourself and to be thinking, am I enjoying what I'm doing? And if not, how can I make it more exciting or more focused on what I really do care about? And so for me, I was in high school, and I think then I was like, all right, I want to do science. I want to solve problems. I don't just want to be sitting in a class. So I went to college, and I was able to do more science in college. But then I was in a chem lab, in a chemistry class, and I did not like being in a chem lab. It was not for me. Maybe some of you are great at that. I was not very good at chem lab. I was always like the last person in the room, finishing up late. And so I said, all right, I want to work in nature. I like nature. Let me try that instead. So I was lucky to be able to find a job doing this ecology project in Costa Rica. And this was a really insane thing. I was basically in the tropical forest at night trying to collect crickets in the dark and not get stung by scorpions. It was an interesting summer. But it actually turned out that there was also this big drought in Costa Rica. And of course, you can't attribute any one drought to climate change, but these kinds of events could get more extreme and more common in the future in some cases. And so it really messed with people's work there. And so then I thought, maybe I should be working to study climate change instead of sort of being affected by it. Did I get stung by scorpions? I think I avoided it. It was actually hard to tell because I got a pinch once and I couldn't tell if it was like a scorpion or just like a splinter. But I had scorpions that snuck into my little room in there. And so by the end of the summer, I had killed 7 scorpions in my room just from like them getting into my room. It was a scary time, but hopefully avoided the worst. Yeah, so I was like, all right, that's enough. I'm gonna study climate change. Ooh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so all your scorpion tips can go in the chat. That's great. Thank you, Hugo. So then I ended up studying geosciences in college, which is the science of the earth science. And I focused on climate change and on aspects of that science. But I was still a little bit disillusioned. I was thinking, this is important, but it's so technical and it's so jargony and it's so in the weeds. I want to be able to translate the science more broadly with the rest of the society who may not be in the science world. And so I was lucky enough to be able to then move to a science communication job, the one that I mentioned with Climate Central. Cinnamon, scorpions. Wow, so many tips that I wish I had known. And so, yeah, I was in a science communication role where I did a lot of science writing, helped with some of those graphics you saw, and it was really fun. But at the same time, we were spending a lot of our time talking about these great solutions. And I personally wasn't walking that talk. I wasn't actually helping with those solutions on the ground. And I wanted to do that even more. And so luckily, I was in a town that actually was developing its own climate action plan. They had lots of different volunteers working on different aspects of the plan. And they wanted some research help to try to actually crunch some numbers and inform their plan. And so I learned about this and talked with some folks there and was able to start a little student research team on the side, just helping with some little research tasks with some of the students who were in my community. And it was a really fun way to give back, to apply these science skills that we learn in classrooms and don't always get to apply, and to really, yeah, be more engaged in my local community and to make an impact. And so that was great. And after that, I was really hoping, all right, so this was great, but how can I broaden my impact and to make this even bigger than this one town? And so that's sort of how I ended up here at MIT in this master's program in technology and policy. And I'm lucky to be working in this research on climate and health impacts, supported graciously by Biogen. And I'm also excited to be working more directly with decision makers in the state of Massachusetts, or the Commonwealth, as they say, and their Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs this summer, hopefully working on some of the climate action that the state is working on in some of their recent events. And so I'm excited to be doing this. I think it'll be a really great step for me. Of course, everyone here is different, and so you may have other preferences in the science or in other worlds, but that's, I think, one example of why it's important to listen to yourself and why it's important to be flexible and to not have a fixed idea of what you want to do, because it may change over time. So that's pretty much it. I just have one last slide with a few lessons learned. The first, again, is that grades do not define you. So actually, my worst grade in high school was in high school biology. It was a tough one. And I wonder whether I should be doing science, but I liked it a lot. So I wanted to push on. And so I ended up doing it more and got better at it the more I did it. Same thing in college. My worst grade in college was this class called Mitigating Climate Change. It was all about climate change. And I had a bad grade in it. And it was challenging, but I really cared about the issue. And so I kept working on it and eventually got better. So just goes to say, like, even if, oh, that is personal knowledge only. Yes, just goes to show that you can keep going with something if you love it, even if the grade doesn't show it that way. How you engage is really how it matters. So that's point one there. The next one is a fun little twist on a saying. Don't just do something, stand there. You might have heard the opposite before, but this is a little fun thing. And the idea is just that it's often better to stand back and to think, is this worth doing? Like, is there something else going on here? Is the cart I'm pushing a cart with square wheels that is not going to be moving? And so, yeah, like there's times when I've considered starting a project or doing something in life where it just won't go anywhere. And so it'll be better to back off before I go too far. And on a related note, I think it is a hard time in some ways to be searching for opportunities. There's lots going on in the world with the pandemic that's especially hard to grapple with. But I guess the reassuring thing is that with some opportunities, you really only need one to get started and to make something out of it. And most of the jobs I applied to out of college, I did not get. Most of the research positions that I was looking at for MIT, I did not hear from, but I was able to get one in each case. And that's all that mattered in terms of moving forward. So even if you're getting rejections, even if you're getting challenges with finding the next step that you want to do, have faith because it only takes one. And I can't wait to see what you'll do. So that is all from me. I'm really excited to talk with you more. It's been a fun chat to be with you on. So yes, feel free to ask any and all questions, I guess, whether it's in the chat or the Q&A. Maybe Connor has more on that.
Yeah, thank you, Will. That was an awesome talk, and I always love these different. I feel like every climate change talk I've seen has always been different, and there's always more information that I can learn from it. So you definitely, I think I speak for everybody when you said the 1.2 billion smartphones could be charged by just mass. I was like, wow, jaw drop, as someone had said in the comments. But it looks like we already have a question from Noreen. She's asked, did you have any accomplishments or awards you received in the science field?
Well, thank you for the question.
Fun one, getting right to it.
Yikes. All right. That's a good question. So actually, I don't know. I spent some time, like, especially in college, sort of applying to different awards and doing that stuff. But honestly, I would say the awards are not what defines you as a person. Like, I did not get most of those awards. Like, maybe I got a couple in school for different things. But I would say those awards, like, they really, I mean, they can be nice. They can look good on a resume. Most of the jobs that I've looked at actually don't prioritize those as much as the experiences that you have and the knowledge that comes out of that. So when I was looking for this job in science communication, it was much more important to have taken classes and done things in science writing and to really show that I could do it well and show that I enjoyed it a lot, than to have some award that said, oh, like science award for something. So yeah, I mean, I guess I've gotten a couple things in school, and always it definitely helps to study well. And of course, I'm not going to say you shouldn't study well, because of course you should. And of course, there's lots to be studied, but I would say it's definitely not everything. And to not discount the experiences, especially the on the ground work in sustainability topics, like I did with the town, that was a really eye-opening experience for me to apply what I learned in school into a real problem and to see how it worked in practice.
Awesome. And then speaking about real problems that you applied stuff to, Hugo asked, do you have any projects in the future that you're working on that you can talk about? Anything you can share some insight on?
Sure. So this is a really exciting time to be doing this, because there are a lot going on. There is a lot going on at MIT, supported by Biogen, and also involving policymakers as well. So I've done a couple things this fall at MIT that have been really exciting as a way to connect research with policy and to be doing more on this. So this fall, actually, I participated in this MIT policy hackathon. I'm not a computer science person. I'm not a hackathon person. Maybe some of you are. But there was a policy hackathon at MIT. So I said, all right, I'll do that. I can do policy at least. And so there was a challenge in the hackathon on environmental justice. And for those of you who don't know about that, that's a really important concept about how we can ensure a healthy environment, not just on average, not just in general, but especially for communities that have historically been overburdened by environmental pollution and other inequities. And so this challenge was basically to take a look at Massachusetts and how its ways to measure environmental justice impacts could be improved. And so we spent a weekend, didn't get much sleep, spent some time doing lots of data work and making lots of suggestions. And we did not win, but we were able afterwards to participate with the director of climate adaptation in the state, who is hoping to work more directly on issues with social vulnerability to climate impacts. So not just overall who's vulnerable, but specifically which populations are most vulnerable and how can we best support those populations as it comes to climate impacts like rising seas or like extreme heat or health, the things that I talked about. And so this is a really good way to apply what we did in the hackathon, even if we didn't win, and even if we didn't get the award, to work with the state and to give them some suggestions for how to think about measuring that. And so
Awesome.
I'm also separately working on this broader research project in partnership with Biogen on trying to measure health impacts like these more holistically in policy. And this summer, I have an opportunity to work directly with some of the folks in the state who are working on these climate policies and on these measurement techniques that Massachusetts has for this. And so I'll be able to apply that work and those conversations back into the research and to hopefully integrate the research and the decisions more together in this work.
Awesome. We have a question in the Q&A. Seems like we're getting some great questions. Thank you guys. Keep them up. So how, if at all, has your coursework, either in your undergrad or graduate, helped you kind of, how the courses and the curriculums helped you boost your work, and how have they kind of helped you progress your career?
Great question. Thank you, Noreen. I think the biggest thing is to think about not just what has been great in the past, but the gaps that I have and how I can best fill those gaps and fill them in ways that can be useful beyond the classroom. So I think in college, some of my most important classes were in things like science communication, different ways to analyze data, different ways to present that data. And these very project-based classes that applied those skills to real problems so that I could learn how to do that in areas outside the classroom as well. At MIT, I've been, since this is graduate school, it's a little bit different from undergraduate college. It really has been about filling in gaps that I did not do in undergrad. So I was not a policy or a law or an economics person in college at all. I was like a science major. And I don't intend to be a lawyer or a politician or a business person, but I think it's important to have that perspective and to be able to know what that's like so that I can at least talk with those people as a science person in those conversations. So I've taken classes in different aspects of economics and policy and law that relate to the environment and energy and climate. And those have been really helpful to round out my experience and to be able to talk more generally with these people.
Awesome. Allison asks, what are your favorite resources for first steps in making shifts in personal life towards sustainability? That's a
that is a hard question. Yeah, I would say so. I would say don't. So not every town may have this, but a lot of towns and cities, and of course bigger areas too, or even like your school, already have lots of sustainability initiatives. And I think there are lots of ways to tap into those without having to reinvent the wheel. Personally, I think, there are lots of things one can do. I think it does come back to what your values are and what your interests are and what you can do physically. But I think even just looking at the drawdown site, the project drawdown site, and seeing like which types of solutions, at least on a global perspective, might be the most impactful. So for instance, I think their third solution in terms of one way of measuring impact is food waste. And it's something that any of us can do, like in terms of, just wasting less food in the house and making sure that we use what we buy and make the most out of our money too, and all of that. There's lots of good reasons to do it beyond the environment. And I think more broadly looking at those co-benefits, those other benefits beyond maybe just the greenhouse gas, but things like health and things like saving money and things like having more comfort for that example with the heat pump. Thinking about those co-benefits and ways where you can have a win-win-win situation or things like that can be really helpful as well.
All right, it looks like Noreen asked, I'm not sure if you can see these in the question and answer, but it looks like Noreen asked, when speaking to someone about climate change, do you think that there's a specific factor or fact that might change their perspective if they kind of like disagree with climate change?
Yeah, thank you for the question again. I think this is a really important reminder of the the idea of values and the fact that it will be different for different people. And that is why it's important to have the right voice in venues so that you can best get a sense for those values. It's a lot easier to have that in a conversation where we can talk more generally about what we care about than in like a social media thread where it's going to be hard to get a sense of that. Yeah, I found that solutions in general can be really great because they can sort of go beyond potential points of disagreement towards things that we all can value together, like solutions that may save money or help with, yeah, like food waste. Like it's hard to disagree with wasting less food. So I think, yeah, solutions can be good. And then for the impact side, focusing on local impacts that really are affecting one's own community. So if it's March in North Carolina, maybe the pollen is an issue, and maybe that's a little way to talk about these things in a way that's not so serious, but is like a small discomfort in terms, and potentially more for some people, in terms of like how long the allergy season and how that season is getting longer as the weather gets warmer.
Awesome. I did have a question too. So you talked about that you worked at Climate Central before. What did you do when you worked there?
Sure. So my official role was called a research and communications fellow. And so what that meant was I would do the background research and a lot of the writing for a weekly newsletter that we would put out to those 1,000 weathercasters that we work with, as well as almost 1,000 journalists at this point who are working with these resources to be able to tell local stories in their communities. And so this is really a fun way to get dirty and to go beyond the science towards actually doing these little projects on the ground and writing about them and getting them done quickly. And so it was a good way to, yeah, to practice doing quick projects with deadlines in ways that mattered, and to have to adjust sometimes, like when a serious hurricane was coming from North Carolina. Like we changed our schedule and we talked about hurricanes because it was a big deal. And my heart goes out for all those who did suffer some of the recent hurricanes. So I think it's an important thing to, yeah, to be able to be flexible and to have a sense for timing and what is the most salient thing to talk about at that moment. So if we had talked about, I don't know, heat waves during a hurricane, it wouldn't have been the smartest thing because it just wouldn't have been on people's minds. And so it's important to meet people where they are and to realize what is that timing that makes sense.
Awesome. And then we have about 3 minutes left. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to type those in. I'll ask one more to kind of keep the ball rolling. But we have about, like I said, 3 minutes. So feel free to your last minute questions in. My last question is, what was like your, what was your original inspiration to kind of really dive into climate change? Was it like a certain climate event, or was it just kind of learning about it in the classroom? Like what made you realize, this is what I want to, kind of go into?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Connor. So I don't think I ever had like a one moment that was like eye-opening, mind blown, I'm going to do this. I think the closest thing I did have was in that summer in Costa Rica with the scorpions, but also the drought, and realizing that knowing that it wasn't just climate change probably, but knowing that these kinds of things could happen more, knowing that if I didn't work on the issue, I might feel powerless, or I might feel like I couldn't be part of the solution. I think for me, especially, like I like feeling like I can help solve things. I like to solve things, and I'm sure many of you do too. I don't like feeling powerless, where I am like vulnerable to something without being able to change it. And so I wanted to go into that so that I knew I could make an impact and be able to have a say as opposed to just being affected by it down the line.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you insure a lot of people in North Carolina. I didn't know this is a thing. There's like the pollen storms where just like a wave of pollen comes over. I think that was like a big eye opening. Like that happens. They're happening more often.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of those things that are just like, it's kind of hard to refute this stuff at this point.
Yeah.
But looks like there's one more question. What is the significance of the picture on the screen? Is there, or is it just a random picture?
Yeah, so yes and yes, it is a random picture, but it also does have significance. So this is an important, I think this is an important reminder of the fact that it takes all hands on deck, literally, to work with this issue. So I know it is Earth Day. Lots of us are thinking about this in the short term, but it's important to continue these conversations beyond Earth Day among all of us, and to really welcome all perspectives, all peoples, all backgrounds, because it will take everyone, again, both the science people and the business people and the policy people and all sorts of others in between, from different backgrounds, from different races, from different ages. I think we've seen in recent times that diversity makes us stronger, and that it makes our solutions more inventive and more powerful if we can crowdsource them together and not leave voices out. And so if we can all do that together, we can hopefully have a more just and healthy world to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it looks like we are, ooh, one last one. Really quick question, if you don't mind, Will. Do you believe having a specific Earth Day, do you believe in having a specific Earth Day, or do you think it should be like an every day is Earth Day kind of thing?
I want to have my cake and eat it too. I think it's great to have a holiday because it makes people think about it. But I say let's continue these conversations forward, because we do need to be working on this every day, and I know I will be.
Awesome. Well said. All right, so it looks like we are out of time for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Will, for joining us and giving this great talk on climate change. I know that I always learn a lot through these speaker series. And it's always great to talk about such a relevant issue like climate change. Hopefully you guys got a chance to check out all those links and resources that Will mentioned that we posted in the chat. They're definitely going to be something that I'm looking into, especially that global weirding that just has a catchy name to it. Yeah, and feel free to reach out to I think you can always reach out to either Community Lab inbox that I sent to you with any questions on any of this stuff. And I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. I think that's pretty much it. But I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your Earth Month. And make sure you go do whatever you can to help impact this growing issue.
Thank you all. It was great to be with you today.